but Jane is still here. The shirt for today is Zelda and Midna from Twilight Princess. I don't know why, I just feel like sharing all of my awesome shirts with you guys. So, I've missed you all here on Read, Rant, and Review. I haven't done book reviews in a while, and I'm excited to bring you a report from my quest to get more into graphic novels. Quite a while back, actually, I got a huge stack of graphic novels from my library. Basically what I did is I went on Goodreads and found a list of like popular or the best graphic novels, and I picked out ones that looked interesting to see if I could get more into reading graphic novels. And yeah, it's kind of worked. Pretty much every time I go to the library now, I stop in at the graphic novel section and see if there's anything that looks interesting. So I'm super excited that I'm finally being able to get into graphic novels. I've wanted to for a really long time and I haven't really been able to get into it. But I wanted to come back and report to you on what I found in that initial stack of graphic novels. So even though I don't usually do wrap-ups, this is going to behave kind of like a wrap-up. Graphic novel roundup, here we go! I'm just going to kind of do it in the order that I read them. You can also check out reviews of most of them on my Goodreads, which will be linked below in the doobly-doo. So first on my list is a graphic novel called Burnout. This one I think I just picked up randomly while I was getting the other ones because it wasn't terribly impressive. It was a pretty cliched story with an environmental message that was trying to be a little bit like, should you do this, should you do that, ooh, gray area, but it really wasn't. The main character was okay. I kind of liked that she was an openly sexual character, and it didn't feel like it was in a titillating way. It felt like it was just maybe more her character and who she was, at least to me. But otherwise, she didn't really have too much of a personality. Her best friend character was the most interesting one. Nothing in this little book surprised me or engaged me, really. The art style was okay and the people were expressive enough, but I had a real problem because the author kept putting in thought bubbles for the main character in like every panel to tell us what we were seeing, even though we were seeing it, which drove me crazy because your book, your illustrations are doing a fine job of showing us what's happening. Your character doesn't need to also tell us what's happening. So overall, I was not impressed with Burnout, and I think I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads. Next, I picked up Miss Marvel because I've been hearing things about it, and even though I'm not really a comic book reader, I wanted to check it out. And I thought it was okay. Maybe it really is just because I'm not a comic book reader, but I wasn't overly impressed with this. I did like the character of Kamala. She was really interesting and I liked watching her find her powers. And of course this is an origin story, so this is how she gets her powers and this is our introduction to all of these characters. The only problem is that I never really bonded with any of them that much. And I feel like I should, if this is like the beginning of a series, I oughta want to keep going with these characters, and I really don't. I didn't ever have a sense of impending danger. I never got the sense that she really had to use her powers. I mean, in the moment she had to use them, but at the same time, like, we have this big looming threat off in the distance that you hear about sometimes, like read the other comics and there'll be more of this threat, but it's not here right now and it makes me not care. She has to save a character that I don't care about from some flunkies, and I don't even understand why that character was kidnapped in the first place, and I just, The illustrations for me were fine, but I felt like they were a little bit too subtle? I guess that's the right word? The character expressions were okay, but I would have liked more from them, especially since it's a comic book, so they could be a little bit more over the top if they wanted to. Like, I didn't need crazy expressions and characters like spitting everything that they say, but I would have liked a little bit more variety of facial expressions and a little bit more expression in general. I gave Ms. Marvel number 1 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Do with that information what you will. Next, I read Blankets, which was the most physically daunting of all of the books that I picked up. It's quite thick, but I decided to jump in and check it out, and I am so happy I did because Blankets really hit home for me. I thought it was amazing. This book is kind of a memoir, and it goes back and forth between the main character's childhood, growing up in an old farmhouse in Wisconsin, and his teenage years, and him having a particular experience in order to try to like find himself and figure out who he is. Sort of a coming-of-age self-exploration story, but a lot of the details really hit home. The stuff about his childhood was really true for me, especially since I also grew up in Wisconsin in an old farmhouse with a dodgy heater and no air conditioning in the summer. So like all of that stuff about just life in that type of situation was just completely, I was just like, yep, that was my childhood. The main character was also a great deal like me. He loved to draw, he was pretty solitary, he liked to just go out and sojourn into the snow, as you do. And he just really struck me as a character that I could relate to very strongly. Let me just say the art in this book was like my perfect 10. It was so beautiful. Some of the images I got finished reading and then I just went back in and found them and just stared at them because they were so great. Like the art in this book alone, you should read it for that because it is really, the illustrations are gorgeous and the author does trust you to understand what's going on without constant narration. It's so pretty. This book does focus on one particular experience over, I believe, like several months that our main character has with flashbacks to his childhood, and so it can come off in the end as a little bit unsatisfying because it just kind of ends after, and you just want it to keep going because you're just having such an amazing time. But it ends after he kind of comes to a realization about this experience that he has had with this girl and with her family, and like how his life was changed by that, but how he moves on from that. And I liked it, but I did wish that we would find out more about his life after that experience. But overall, I loved Blankets. Someday I might even own it. As you know, I don't put books on my shelf unless I love them or they were gifted to me. There's a little clause there. I gave this book technically 4.8 stars out of 5 on Goodreads if you care about that sort of thing. The next one I read was Geese. I don't know how to pronounce it. It was the first one in a series and it was called A Matter of Life and Death. I have not been able to find any more in this series. If you know, if you can hook me up, let me know. I quite enjoyed this one. It had a really fast-paced story that got right down to business. It was an ensemble story, which I didn't know it was going to be, but I was happy to find out that it was because each character was unique and distinct and I was interested in following them all. Even though there's a clear main character, she didn't really get much more like screen time than the other characters, and I really liked that. Some of them are funny, some of them are troubled. One of my favorite ones is like a one who's very gray, like very morally gray, and I really enjoyed that character quite a bit. But we are thrown in this book right into the life and death situation in which people who are completely unprepared for this life and death situation have to deal with it. We're talking scholars, we're talking children. As for the art style of this book, I didn't like it as much. It can be very interesting and pretty, but sometimes I just wasn't as big of a fan. While the characters were distinct artistically, they often just completely went off model, and I think that was on purpose, like they weren't supposed to always look the same from panel to panel, but it kind of bothered me that sometimes they just looked weird just because of the art style. I could take it or leave it. Others of you, though, might love it, so definitely check this one out if it sounds interesting to you. But I did quite enjoy this one, and I gave it 4.5 stars on Goodreads if you care. The next one that I read was Nimona, which I knew going in was actually a webcomic series that has been published into a full-fledged graphic novel, and it's kind of in two parts. For the most part, I enjoyed Nimona. It was pretty obviously a webcomic in some ways, especially because the first half is a lot lighter than the second half. And sometimes I feel like you get that with webcomics because the author didn't maybe necessarily plan a huge storyline and then their comic became popular and they knew that they wanted to now have a big storyline. But Nimona, our main character, is a little changeling girl who can turn into anything, and she befriends this villain. There's a lot of quotations going on here because none of the characters are really what they seem to be. And she wants to get up to shenanigans with him, and shenanigans ensue, even though our villain is not very villainous. He's actually kind of a nice guy. He's a whoopee, okay? He's a whoopee. The art style in Nimona is pretty simple. There are not a lot of backgrounds going on. The color scheme is very simple, and personally I didn't like that as much. I know it's pretty common with webcomics to have this simpler style, and that's fine, but for me it wasn't a huge hit as far as the art goes. But the colors were vibrant and the story was entertaining enough to keep me engaged. I gave Nimona 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Next, I read the Revival Volume 1, called You're Among Friends. This one I picked up. It's more of a comic book again, but this one I picked up because zombies. Y'all know that I love zombies, and it looked like a slightly different take on the zombie lore. And it was. It was okay. I liked it enough to keep reading it. The story was fine, but the characters didn't really do anything for me. There is a lot of body horror in this, so if gore is not something you like to see, then definitely don't check these out. Didn't bother me too much. The main character, a cop investigating some murder or something, I don't even actually remember, but it's probably a murder, is not a very interesting main character to me. She just wasn't. Like I said, none of the characters really spoke to me. The art style was fine, pretty realistic, and I liked the way some of the characters were illustrated, like that handsome CDC guy. However, I did have one major gripe, and that's that whoever drew this does not know how horses' legs work. You fucked it up. That's not how horses' legs work. But it was a good, entertaining read, and if you're into zombies, you might like it too. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on the Reads of Good. Second to last, I read a book called Stitches, which was not what I expected, but I turned out to like it pretty well. This was another memoir-style story, again about a young artist coming up, because it turns out people who write graphic novels are usually artists, and so art is a big part of their life growing up. So anyway, it's a story of a kid coming up and his abusive household and the whole situation that he's in. His parents are not very good people, quite frankly, and he is dealing with not being able to speak for a lot of the book and being afraid to speak for some of the book, and it's very interesting. I liked the illustration. It was very like spooky, I guess. Like, not spooky as in, ooh, there are ghosts, but the way it was drawn had this edge to it that I really liked, and it made everything just seem a little bit off. This memoir was not quite as focused as Blankets on a few key events, and so it kind of went through our characters' life and experiences, and it did kind of rush through them very quickly. And that made me a little bit sad that we didn't linger really too many places, because I was engaged enough in what was happening and all of these people that I wanted to read more about them. I liked that in the end the main character comes to understand his family better and why they might have done the things that they did, even if those things are not forgivable exactly. So overall, it was an intense, gripping memoir-type story with illustrations that I liked. It just wasn't maybe as focused as Blankets, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And last, I read a book called Black Sad, which is a noir-style story, or a series of 3 stories about a character called Black Sad, who is an anthropomorphized panther in a world of anthropomorphized animals. And I wanted to like this because I do tend to be drawn to anthropomorphized animals, and I really liked the noir kind of setting. but this one fell a little bit flat for me for a number of reasons. The illustrations and the way that the characters were drawn was very engaging, and I liked the way the different animals were drawn. However, all of the women were given very human features. Like, they would just have like a little button nose, like a little kitty nose, and then they may have kitty ears, and then they just have, you know, full human lips, human eyes, human face, human sexualized body. And I didn't like that. I wanted to see males and females of every species. I suppose you can make the argument that I was trying to say that men are animals and women are not, but in reality we all know what it was. It was so that if you were reading this comic book, you could feel better about sexualizing the female characters because they look really human, so you could be like, yeah, I'm not into animal people because those ones look practically like people. And the female characters were very sexualized in this book. There are a lot of sexual images, there's a lot of chest jutting and ass sticking out and all this stuff. But if you can see past that, the stories are fairly engaging. They are noir style and they pretty much hit the classic noir beats. I was really hoping that they might go somewhere else. You know, Black Sad is the traditional gravelly voiced sad detective guy who gets away with way more stuff than he should. And of course he has soul pain because of course he does. I gave Black Sad 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So there you go, that was my giant pile of graphic novels. And yeah, I've been reading more graphic novels since then. It's been really fun, and I'm super glad that I was finally able to get into graphic novels. It took me a really long time, but you guys can probably look forward to more graphic novel reviews eventually here on my channel, so that's exciting for all of you. But until then, I will see you all next time with whatever video we happen to be doing next time. Bye!